Arthur Ward's palm meets Zira's scaled hand, and her entire body quivers. The Gamelon negotiator's eyes widen, pupils dilating as she fights to maintain her composure. Arthur, seasoned human diplomat, furrows his brow. He's shaken countless alien appendages, but never elicited such a visceral reaction. Zira abruptly withdraws her hand, clearing her throat. We must conclude today's negotiations, she stammers, voice uncharacteristically strained. The Gamelon delegation hurriedly exits the chamber, leaving Arthur bewildered amidst the sudden silence. Hours later, Arthur finds himself wandering the labyrinthine corridors of the Gamelon diplomatic complex. His mind races, replaying the day's events. A hushed conversation catches his attention. Two Gamelon males, their voices low and urgent, discuss an unprecedented phenomenon. Arthur presses himself against the cool metallic wall, straining to hear. The human's touch. It triggered a response we've never seen before, one whispers. If word of this spreads, it could jeopardize everything we've worked for, the other responds, fear evident in his tone. Arthur's heart pounds. He stumbled upon something monumental, something that could reshape the entire landscape of human-Gamelon relations. The weight of this knowledge settles heavily on his shoulders. He knows he should report this to his superiors, but the potential consequences give him pause. The next morning, Arthur makes a calculated decision. During a tour of Gamelon facilities, he deliberately brushes against Zira. The effect is instantaneous. She trembles, her scale skin flushing a deep azure. Her voice wavers as she barks an order. Isolate the human. Keep him away from all Gamelon females. Guards flank Arthur, escorting him to a separate wing of the complex. As he's led away, he catches a glimpse of Zira. She leans against a wall, chest heaving, clearly struggling to regain control. In his isolation, Arthur pieces together the puzzle. The Gamelons face extinction, a genetic disorder rendering them infertile. Their hope for survival lies in an alliance with humans, gaining access to Earth's advanced medical technology. But now this unexpected reaction to human touch threatens to derail everything. Arthur paces his quarters, mind racing. He holds the power to ensure the success of the negotiations. But at what cost? The ethical implications are staggering. He can't exploit this vulnerability, yet he can't ignore it either. A decision crystallizes. Arthur requests a private meeting with Zira. It's a risk, but one he must take. As he's led to a secluded chamber, tension crackles in the air. The fate of two species hangs in the balance, hinging on this moment. The door slides open. Zira stands alone, her posture rigid, eyes wary. Arthur steps inside, the door sealing behind him with a soft hiss. They regard each other in silence, the air thick with unspoken words and barely contained reactions. Arthur takes a deep breath, preparing to navigate the most challenging diplomatic waters of his career. Arthur's hand hesitated over the door panel, his mind racing with potential outcomes. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead, and pressed his palm against the smooth surface. The door slid open with a soft hiss. Zira stood in the center of the room, her posture rigid and her eyes fixed on Arthur as he entered. The door sealed behind him, leaving them alone in the tense silence of the chamber. Negotiator Ward, Zira said, her voice carefully controlled, I trust you understand the gravity of this situation. Arthur nodded, taking a cautious step forward. I do, Zira, and I believe we need to address it head-on if we're to salvage these negotiations. As he moved, his foot caught on an uneven section of the floor. Arthur stumbled, instinctively reaching out to steady himself. His hand brushed against Zira's arm, and the effect was instantaneous. Zira's eyes widened, her pupils dilating rapidly. A shudder ran through her body, and before Arthur could react, she lunged forward. Her scaled form pressed against him, pinning him to the wall. Arthur froze, acutely aware of every point of contact between them. For a moment, they remained like that, hearts racing, breaths mingling in the small space between them. Then, as quickly as it had happened, Zira jerked away. She stumbled backward, her chest heaving as she fought to regain control. I apologize, she gasped. Her scales flushed a deep azure. That was Unprecedented. Arthur straightened, his own pulse pounding in his ears. No need for apologies, he said, his voice hoarse. But I think we can both agree we need to find a solution quickly. Zira nodded, composing herself with visible effort. You're right, and there's something you need to know. She moved to a nearby console, her fingers flying over the controls. A holographic display flickered to life between them, showing complex molecular structures. Our scientists have been working on a potential cure for our genetic disorder, Zira explained, her voice steadying as she focused on the technical details. But it requires a specific enzyme found only in human DNA. Arthur studied the display, his diplomatic training kicking in as he processed the implications. I assume your initial plan was to request voluntary human donors. Zira nodded. Yes, but this reaction has complicated matters significantly. Arthur's mind raced, weighing options and potential outcomes. A bold plan began to form in his mind. What if I volunteered to be the first donor? He proposed. Your scientists could study the enzyme and its interaction with gamelon physiology directly. Zira's eyes widened in surprise. You would do that? Despite the risks and unknowns? Arthur met her gaze steadily. For the sake of both our species, yes. It's a risk I'm willing to take. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of activity. Arthur underwent a battery of tests and procedures as gamelon scientists extracted the necessary enzyme from his DNA. He found himself spending more time with Zira, who oversaw the project personally. As they worked side by side, their professional relationship began to evolve. Conversations that started about enzyme extraction and diplomatic protocols drifted into more personal territory. Arthur found himself fascinated by Zira's sharp intellect and dry humor, while she seemed equally intrigued by his adaptability and willingness to embrace the unknown. Yet underlying every interaction was the ever-present tension of the arousal effect. Each accidental brush of hands or momentary proximity sent a visible shudder through Zira, and Arthur found himself hyper-aware of her presence. On the fifth day of testing, a breakthrough came. Dr. Lax, the lead gamelon scientist, burst into the observation room where Arthur and Zira were reviewing data. We've made a remarkable discovery, Dr. Lax announced, his scaled face flushed with excitement. Prolonged exposure to human touch appears to gradually reduce the intensity of the arousal effect in gamelon females. Zira leaned forward, her eyes widening. Are you certain? Dr. Lax nodded vigorously. The data is clear. This suggests that controlled interaction between humans and gamelons could lead to a more stable long-term relationship between our species. As the implications of this discovery sank in, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Red lights flashed, and the facility's AI announced a security breach. Arthur and Zira exchanged alarmed glances. What's happening? Arthur asked, already moving towards the door. Before Zira could respond, the door burst open. A group of armed gamelon males stormed in, led by a towering figure with deep crimson scales. General Krell, Zira gasped, her hand instinctively reaching for Arthur's arm. Krell's eyes narrowed at the sight of them standing together. This facility is now under my control, he announced, his voice booming through the room. All humans are to be immediately expelled from gamelon territory. The alliance is dissolved. Arthur's mind raced, assessing their options. He could see the fear and persistence warring in Zira's eyes. As Krell's followers began to spread through the facility, securing key areas, Arthur realized that the fate of both their species now rested in their hands. He leaned close to Zira, speaking in a low, urgent tone. We need to find a way out of here. Is there any kind of emergency exit or hidden passage? Zira's eyes lit up with sudden realization. The maintenance tunnels, she whispered back. There's an access point in the storage room down the hall. As Krell turned to bark orders at his subordinates, Arthur and Zira exchanged a silent look of understanding. They would have to act fast, relying on each other more than ever before. The future of human gamelon relations hung in the balance, and their next moves would determine the course of history for both their worlds. With Krell distracted, they edged towards the door, ready to make their desperate bid for escape. Arthur and Zira moved silently towards the door, their eyes locked on Krell as he barked orders at his subordinates. The moment his attention shifted, they slipped out into the corridor, their hearts pounding in unison. "This way," Zira whispered, guiding Arthur down the hallway with a gentle touch on his arm. The contact sent a visible shudder through her body, but she pressed on, persistence etched across her features. They reached the storage room and Zira quickly located the hidden access panel. As the maintenance tunnel entrance slid open, alarms blared through the facility. Without hesitation, they plunged into the narrow passage, the door sealing shut behind them. The tunnel was cramped and dark, forcing Arthur and Zira to press close together as they navigated the twisting path. Each brush of skin against scales sent electric jolts through both of them, the intensity of the arousal effect amplified by their proximity. "We need to keep moving," Arthur gasped, his voice strained. Zira nodded, unable to form words as she fought against the overwhelming sensations coursing through her body. As they crawled through a particularly tight section, Arthur's hand slipped, causing him to fall against Zira. The full-body contact proved too much for their fraying control. In an instant, professionalism gave way to raw need. Their lips met in a desperate, passionate kiss. Hands roamed, exploring unfamiliar anatomy with feverish intensity. The narrow confines of the tunnel only added to the urgency of their encounter. When it was over, they lay tangled together, breath coming in short gasps. As the haze of passion cleared, Arthur noticed something different about Zira. The tremors that had racked her body at his touch were gone, replaced by a calm he hadn't seen since their first meeting. "Zira," he said softly, "how do you feel?" She blinked, surprise evident in her eyes. "I feel clear. The overwhelming response to your presence, it's muted." Before they could fully process this development, a distant echo of voices reached them. Krell's search parties were entering the maintenance tunnels. "We need to move," Arthur said, helping Zira to her feet. They pressed on, eventually emerging from the tunnel into the harsh Gamelon wilderness. As they caught their breath, taking in the alien landscape of purple-hued vegetation and towering crystalline formations, the implications of their encounter began to sink in. "Arthur," Zira said, her voice a mix of wonder and scientific curiosity, "I believe the enzyme in your bodily fluids has had a more potent effect than mere touch. This could be a significant breakthrough." Arthur nodded, his mind racing with the possibilities. "We need to find a way to replicate this effect on a larger scale. But first, we need to get somewhere safe." As if in answer to their dilemma, a rustle in the nearby foliage caught their attention. They tensed, ready for a confrontation. But instead, a group of Gamelon females emerged, led by a tall, slender figure with iridescent scales. "Zira," the leader called out, her voice tinged with relief. "It's me, Dr. Alara. We saw you emerge from the tunnel. Are you all right?" Zira's eyes widened in recognition. "Dr. Alara, what are you doing out here?" As the group approached, Dr. Alara explained the situation. "Krell's coup forced us to flee. We've been conducting secret research on the human-Gamelon interaction. When we heard about the chaos in the city, we knew we had to protect our work." Arthur stepped forward, introducing himself. Dr. Alara's eyes lit up with interest as she observed the lack of reaction from Zira to his proximity. "Fascinating," she murmured. "It seems you've made a discovery of your own. Come, we have a hidden laboratory nearby. We need to run some tests and discuss our findings. I believe we may have stumbled upon the key to solving our species' crisis." As they followed Dr. Alara and her team through the alien wilderness, Arthur and Zira exchanged a loaded glance. Their unexpected intimate encounter had not only provided a potential solution to the Gamelon's problems, but had also deepened their personal connection in ways neither had anticipated. The weight of their discovery, coupled with the looming threat of Krell's forces, created a palpable tension within the group. They knew that the next few hours would be crucial in determining the fate of both their species and the fragile alliance between them. As they approached a well-concealed cave entrance that served as Dr. Ilara's makeshift laboratory, the sound of distant engines echoed across the landscape. Krell's search parties were expanding their efforts beyond the city limits. Time was running out. Arthur, Zira, and their newfound allies hurried into the cave, knowing that the race to synthesize a solution had begun in earnest. The future of human gamelan relations now rested in their hands, with the added complication of their growing personal entanglement. Feelings. Their eyes met, a silent understanding passing between them as they followed Dr. Alara into the hidden laboratory. The cave system was a marvel of natural and artificial engineering. Bioluminescent fungi cast an ethereal glow across the rough-hewn walls, while advanced gamelan technology hummed quietly in the background. Dr. Alara led them to a central chamber where holographic displays flickered to life, showcasing complex molecular structures and genetic data. "We need to work quickly," Dr. Alara said, her fingers flying across a control panel. "Our sensors indicate Krell's forces are expanding their search pattern. It's only a matter of time before they reach this area." Arthur and Zira exchanged worried glances. "What's our plan?" Arthur asked, stepping closer to examine the data displays. Dr. Alara's expression was grim but determined. "We continue our work. The potential benefits of our research far outweigh the risks of discovery." She turned to face them fully. "What we've learned from your encounter could be the key to solving our species' crisis." Zira nodded, her scales flushing slightly at the memory. "I agree. We can't abandon our progress now." As they delved into their work, the distant sound of engines grew louder. Krell's search parties were drawing closer. The tension in the lab was palpable as they raced against time, analyzing data and synthesizing compounds. Hours passed in a blur of activity. Dr. Ilare ran test after test on Zira, her eyes widening with each new result. Finally, she stepped back from her equipment, her expression a mix of awe and disbelief. "This is unprecedented," she breathed. "Zira, you're carrying a human gamelan hybrid embryo." The revelation sent shockwaves through the room. Zira's hand instinctively went to her abdomen, while Arthur stood frozen, processing the implications. "A hybrid?" Zira whispered. "But how is that possible?" Dr. Ilara's scales shimmered with excitement. The unique properties of human DNA, combined with the enzyme we've been studying, it's created something entirely new. This could be the key to solving our fertility crisis. Their celebration was short-lived. A loud explosion rocked the cave, sending small rocks cascading from the ceiling. Dr. Alara rushed to a monitoring station. "They found the outer chamber," she reported, her voice tight with worry. "We need to move now." In a flurry of activity, they gathered their most critical research materials. Arthur helped Zira, who was already showing signs of fatigue from her rapidly advancing pregnancy. As they prepared to leave, Dr. Alara activated a series of hidden charges, set to destroy their equipment and erase any trace of their presence. They fled deeper into the cave system, the sounds of pursuit echoing behind them. The tunnels twisted and turned, leading them into the heart of the gamelan wilderness. When they finally emerged, they found themselves in a dense forest of crystalline trees, their purple leaves shimmering in the alien sunlight. "There's another cave system not far from here," Dr. Alara said, consulting a holographic map. "We can set up a new lab and continue our work." As they made their way through the strange forest, Arthur couldn't help but notice Zira's labored breathing. Her pregnancy was progressing at an alarming rate, her abdomen visibly swollen after just a few days. They reached the new cave system as night fell, the gamelan moons casting an eerie glow across the landscape. Inside, they quickly set up a makeshift laboratory using the equipment they'd managed to salvage. Days passed in a blur of intense research and constant vigilance. Arthur and Dr. Alara worked tirelessly to synthesize a compound that could replicate the effects of human DNA on gamelan physiology. Every few hours, they ran tests on Zira, monitoring the development of the hybrid child growing within her. Their progress was promising, but time was not on their side. Zira's condition was deteriorating rapidly, her body struggling to cope with the unprecedented pregnancy. They needed advanced medical equipment to stabilize her, equipment that was only available in the gamelan capital. As Arthur pored over the latest test results, a commotion at the cave entrance caught his attention. Dr. Alara burst into the lab, her scales pale with fear. "They've found us," she gasped. "A search party is right outside." Arthur's mind raced. They couldn't run, not with Zira in her current condition. They couldn't fight, outnumbered and outgunned as they were. There was only one option left. "We need to talk to them," he said, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. "Maybe we can make them understand the importance of our work." Before anyone could object, he strode towards the cave entrance. As he emerged into the moonlight, he found himself face to face with a group of Gamelon soldiers, their weapons trained on him. At their head stood a young female Gamelon, her scales a vibrant blue that marked her as an officer. Her eyes widened as she took in Arthur's human features. "I am Lieutenant Kara," she announced, her voice sharp with authority. "By order of General Krell, you are under arrest for—" Her words trailed off as Arthur stepped closer, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. The arousal effect hit her like a physical force, causing her to stumble back. "Please," Arthur said, his voice low and urgent. "We need your help. What we've discovered could save your entire species. Just give us a chance to explain." Lieutenant Kara's gaze darted between Arthur and her visibly affected female soldiers. In that moment of hesitation, Arthur saw a glimmer of hope. The fate of two species hung in the balance, and everything depended on what happened next. The tension in the air was palpable as Arthur locked eyes with Lieutenant Kara, silently willing her to understand the gravity of the situation. After a moment that felt like an eternity, Lieutenant Kara lowered her weapon slightly. "Explain," she commanded, her voice wavering as she fought against the arousal effect. Arthur seized the opportunity. "We've made a breakthrough that could save your species, but we need your help. One of our team is in critical condition." As if on cue, a pained cry echoed from within the cave. Lieutenant Kara's eyes widened in recognition. "Zira." Arthur nodded grimly. "She's carrying a human Gamelon hybrid. It's developing at an unprecedented rate, and her body can't keep up. We need advanced medical equipment to stabilize her." Lieutenant Kara hesitated, her gaze darting between Arthur and her squad. Finally, she made a decision. "Show me." Inside the cave, the scene was chaotic. Dr. Alara hovered over Zira, who lay on a makeshift bed, her abdomen swollen and her scales pale. The other Gamelon researchers worked frantically at their stations, analyzing data and synthesizing compounds. Lieutenant Kara took in the sight, her expression a mix of awe and concern. "This is impossible," she breathed. "But it's happening," Arthur insisted, "and it could be the key to solving your fertility crisis." As they spoke, Commander Vex, one of Kara's officers, approached with a look of willpower. "Lieutenant, if what they're saying is true, we can't ignore this. It goes against everything General Krell has told us, but the evidence is right in front of us." Kara nodded, her drive strengthening. "Agreed, we need to get them to a proper medical facility." But their plans were interrupted by the sound of approaching aircraft. Krell's forces had tracked them down. "We're out of time," Arthur said urgently. "We need to move now." In a flurry of activity, they prepared to evacuate. Arthur and Commander Vex carefully moved Zira onto a portable stretcher, while Dr. Alara gathered their most critical research materials. Lieutenant Kara organized her squad, assigning roles for defense and transportation. As they emerged from the cave, the whine of engines grew louder. Krell's ships appeared on the horizon, closing in fast. "This way," Kara shouted, leading them towards a hidden path through the crystalline forest. "There's a secret medical facility not far from here. We can make it if we hurry." They moved as quickly as they could, with Arthur and Vex carrying Zira's stretcher. The uneven terrain and the constant threat of discovery made their progress agonizingly slow. Zira's condition worsened with each passing minute, her breathing becoming increasingly labored. As they neared the facility, the sound of Krell's forces grew closer. Lieutenant Kara made a quick decision. "Commander Vex, take half the squad and set up a defensive perimeter. Buy us as much time as you can." Vex nodded grimly, gathering a group of soldiers and heading back the way they came. The rest of the team pressed on, finally reaching the hidden medical facility just as the sounds of battle erupted behind them. Inside, Dr. Alara and the facility staff immediately went to work, hooking Zira up to advanced life support systems and beginning a series of urgent treatments. Arthur stood by, feeling helpless as he watched the Gamelon medical team fight to save Zira and their unborn child. Lieutenant Kara approached him, her expression serious. We need to talk about what happens next. If what you've discovered is true, it could change everything for our people. But General Krell won't give up easily. Arthur nodded, his mind racing. We need to get the truth out to your people. If they knew what was really happening, Krell would lose his support. The Central Communications Hub, Kara said, her eyes lighting up. If we could broadcast the truth from there, every Gamelon on the planet would hear it. Their planning was interrupted by an urgent call from Dr. Alara. Arthur, we need you here now. He rushed to Zira's side, his heart pounding. Dr. Alara's expression was grim. Her body is rejecting the hybrid embryo. We need to stabilize both of them, but our treatments aren't working fast enough. Arthur looked at Zira's pale face, then back to Dr. Ilara. What can I do? We need a direct infusion of your DNA, Dr. Ilara explained quickly. It's risky, but it might be our only chance to save them both. Without hesitation, Arthur nodded. Do it. As Dr. Ilara prepared the procedure, Lieutenant Kara approached. I'm taking a team to the communications hub. We'll get the truth out, no matter what. Arthur clasped her arm in gratitude. Be careful, and thank you. As Kara and her team departed, Arthur turned his full attention to Zira. He took her hand, steeling himself for what was to come. I'm here, he whispered. We're going to get through this together. Dr. Alara activated the DNA transfer device, and Arthur felt a jolt of energy course through him. As his life force flowed into Zira, he could feel the connection between them growing stronger. The hybrid embryo, sensing the influx of human DNA, began to develop at an even more rapid pace. Outside, the sounds of battle grew closer. Commander Vex and his team were being pushed back, and Krell's forces were closing in on the medical facility. The race against time had reached its most critical point, with the fate of two species hanging in the balance. Balance with the fate of two species hanging in the air. Arthur gritted his teeth, feeling the strain of the DNA transfer as his life force flowed into Zira. The hybrid embryo within her responded to the influx of human genetic material, its development accelerating at an astonishing rate. Suddenly, Zira's eyes flew open, and she let out a gasp of pain. Dr. Alara quickly disconnected the transfer device and rushed to her side. The baby's coming, she announced, her voice tight with urgency. We need to prepare for delivery immediately. Arthur moved to Zira's side, grasping her hand as she began to pant heavily. The sounds of battle outside grew louder, signaling that Krell's forces were closing in on their location. As Dr. Alara and her team worked frantically to deliver the hybrid child, Arthur positioned himself between the entrance and Zira's bed. He was determined to protect his newfound family, whatever it takes. The doors burst open and General Krell strode in, his scales gleaming with anger and his energy weapon raised. Hand over the abomination, he snarled, his eyes fixed on Zira's swollen abdomen. It threatens the purity of our species. Arthur stood his ground, arms spread wide. Never, he declared, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. This child is the key to saving your people. You're blinded by your own prejudice, Krell. The general's finger tightened on the trigger, the weapon humming with deadly energy. The standoff stretched on, neither side willing to back down. Behind Arthur, Zira let out a cry of pain as another contraction hit her. Just as the tension reached its breaking point, Lieutenant Kara and Commander Vex burst into the room, leading a group of defected Gamelon soldiers. They quickly surrounded Krell, creating a momentary distraction. Arthur seized the opportunity, lunging forward and grasping Krell's arm. The effect was instantaneous. The general's eyes widened in shock as the overwhelming arousal hit him, causing him to stumble backward and drop his weapon. Recovering quickly, Krell grappled with Arthur, his military training giving him an edge in the close-quarters combat. They traded blows, Arthur driven by the need to protect Zira and their unborn child, while Krell fought with the desperation of a man clinging to his outdated beliefs. As they struggled, more Gamelon females entered the facility, drawn by the commotion and the recent broadcasts about the cure. The sight of Arthur sent waves of arousal through the newcomers, adding to the chaos in the room. Krell, momentarily distracted by the influx of affected females, broke free from Arthur's grip. With a snarl of rage, he made a desperate lunge towards Zira, who now cradled a newborn hybrid child in her arms. Arthur's heart leaped into his throat as he saw Krell closing in on his family. He tackled the general with all his might, sending them both crashing into a nearby table laden with medical equipment. The impact sent vials and instruments flying. One particular vial, containing the synthesized fertility treatment, shattered upon contact with both men. The liquid splashed across their skin, and to everyone's shock, Krell began to exhibit signs similar to the arousal effect experienced by the Gamelon females. The general writhed on the floor, overwhelmed by the sudden and intense sensations coursing through his body. Dr. Ilara, who had been monitoring the situation while tending to Zira and the newborn, quickly assessed the situation. "Fascinating," she murmured, her scientific curiosity piqued despite the chaos. "It seems the compound, when combined with Arthur's DNA, has an even more potent effect on Gamelon males than females. This could be the breakthrough we need to administer the treatment without direct human contact." Commander Vex, seeing Krell incapacitated, quickly moved to restrain him. "General Krell, you are under arrest for attempted coup and endangering the future of our species," he announced, his voice carrying the weight of authority. As Krell was led away, still shuddering from the effects of the treatment, attention turned to Zira and the hybrid child. Dr. Ilara approached, her eyes wide with wonder as she examined the infant. "Incredible," she breathed, running a scanner over the child's tiny body. "The baby appears to be in perfect health, displaying a unique combination of human and Gamelon traits. This is truly unprecedented." Arthur moved to Zira's side, gazing down at their child with a mixture of awe and love. The infant's skin had a faint bluish tint, with small, barely visible scales along its arms and legs. Its eyes, when they fluttered open, were a striking mix of human and Gamelon features. "We did it," Zira whispered, her voice weak but filled with joy. "Our child, our hope for the future." As news of Krell's defeat and the successful birth of the hybrid child spread throughout the facility, a sense of cautious optimism began to take hold. The Gamelon scientists eagerly gathered around, their curiosity piqued by the unprecedented event they had just witnessed. Lieutenant Kara approached Arthur, her expression a mix of respect and uncertainty. "What happens now?" she asked, her gaze shifting between Arthur, Zira, and the child. Arthur looked down at his new family, then back at the assembled Gamelons. He realized that this was just the beginning of a new chapter, one that would reshape the relationship between humans and Gamelons forever. "Now," he said, his voice firm with commitment, "we build a future together, one where both our species can thrive." As the group began to discuss the immediate next steps, a commotion outside caught their attention. The sound of approaching vehicles and shouting voices filtered through the walls of the facility. Arthur tensed, prepared for another potential threat. Lieutenant Kara moved to the window, peering out cautiously. Her eyes widened in surprise. It's a crowd," she reported. "Gamelons from all over the region. They're gathering outside." Arthur joined her at the window, his heart racing. As he looked out at the sea of blue-skinned faces, he realized that the news of their breakthrough had spread faster than he could have imagined. The future of both species now hung in the balance, and the next few moments would be crucial in determining the path forward. Forward that would shape the destiny of both species. As Arthur watched the growing crowd outside, he felt a mixture of hope and apprehension. The future he had envisioned was unfolding before his eyes, but he knew the path ahead would be far from simple. In the days that followed, the medical facility became the epicenter of a new era in human-Gamelon relations. Dr. Ilara and her team worked tirelessly to study the unique physiology of Arthur and Zira's child, whom they named Arian. The infant's rapid growth and development astounded both human and Gamelon scientists, prompting extensive research to understand the intricacies of this unprecedented hybrid. Arthur, now thrust into the role of human ambassador to Gamelon, found himself navigating a complex web of diplomacy and scientific breakthrough. He worked closely with Commander Vex to establish protocols for the safe administration of the fertility treatment, while also addressing the cultural implications of increased human presence on Gamelon. As news of Arian's birth spread, more humans arrived on Gamelon to assist with the implementation of the fertility treatment. Among them was Dr. Marcus Green, a renowned human geneticist who joined Dr. Alara's team. Their combined expertise accelerated the refinement of the treatment, bringing hope to countless Gamelon families. The influx of humans, however, brought its own set of challenges. Many Gamelon females experienced the arousal effect for the first time, leading to a surge in demand for the treatment. To manage this, the newly formed Interspecies Relations Council established designated treatment centers across Gamelon. Arthur visited one such center, observing the carefully orchestrated process. Gamelon females waited in specially designed rooms, their bodies trembling with anticipation as human medical staff administered the treatment through sealed chambers. The air was thick with a mixture of excitement and nervous energy. "We're making progress," Dr. Green remarked, guiding Arthur through the facility, "but the demand is overwhelming our current capabilities." Arthur nodded, his brow furrowed. "We need to scale up production and distribution, fast. Have you made any headway on reducing the side effects?" Before Dr. Green could respond, an alarm blared through the center. They rushed to the source of the commotion, finding a group of agitated Gamelon males attempting to force their way into a treatment room. "Stand down!" Commander Vex's voice boomed as he arrived with a security team. The intruders hesitated, then reluctantly backed away. Arthur approached one of the Gamelon males, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "What's going on here?" The Gamelon, his scales flushed with anger and frustration, spoke through gritted teeth. "Why should the females have all the benefits? We demand equal access to the human treatment." The incident highlighted the growing tensions on Gamelon. As Arthur and Commander Vex worked to develop policies promoting safe and consensual interactions between humans and Gamelons, they faced resistance from various factions. A group of Gamelon purists, led by Major Zorn, began to emerge as a significant threat. They viewed the human presence as a corruption of Gamelon society and launched a campaign of sabotage against treatment centers. Arthur received reports of violent clashes in several Gamelon cities. He pored over security footage with Commander Vex, watching as purist agitators spread propaganda and incited riots. "We need to address this quickly," Arthur said, his voice tight with concern. "If we don't get control of the situation, everything we've worked for could unravel." While Arthur grappled with the escalating social and political crises, Zira faced her own challenges. Arian's growth rate far exceeded that of both human and Gamelon children, bringing unforeseen complications. In their private quarters, Zira watched with a mixture of awe and concern as Ariane, now resembling a toddler despite being only weeks old, effortlessly solved complex puzzles meant for much older children. "Arthur," she called, her voice trembling slightly. "Look at this." Arthur entered the room just in time to see Arian lift a heavy piece of furniture with ease, giggling as if it were a game. The child's strength and intelligence were developing at an alarming rate, surpassing both human and Gamelon norms. As they marveled at their child's abilities, a sense of unease settled over them. The implications of Arian's enhanced capabilities were far-reaching, and they knew it wouldn't be long before others took notice. Their fears were realized when Dr. Alara approached them with a proposition. "We've made a breakthrough in our research," she explained, her eyes alight with excitement. "Arian's hybrid physiology contains a key component that could enhance the fertility treatment's effectiveness and reduce its side effects." Arthur and Zira exchanged worried glances as Dr. Alara continued. "However, extracting this component would require subjecting Arian to a series of medical procedures." The weight of the decision pressed down on them. As they contemplated the potential benefits to the Gamelon species against the risk to their child, a new threat emerged from the shadows. Major Zorn, having infiltrated the medical facility's communication system, listened intently to Dr. Ilara's proposal. A cruel smile played across his features as he formulated a plan. With Arian in his possession, he could control the fate of both species. As Arthur and Zira grappled with their decision, unaware of the looming danger, Major Zorn set his plan in motion. The future of human Gamelon relations hung in the balance. with Arian unwittingly at the center of a brewing storm. As Arthur processed the gravity of the situation, a frantic knock on the door shattered the moment of contemplation. Lieutenant Kara burst into the room, her face etched with worry. "Commander, we've intercepted a transmission. Major Zorn and his purists are planning to kidnap Arian." Arthur's blood ran cold. He exchanged a quick glance with Zira, who instinctively clutched their child closer to her chest. Without hesitation, Arthur sprang into action. "Contact Commander Vex immediately," he ordered Lieutenant Kara. "We need to mobilize a special task force to protect Arian and track down Zorn's faction." As Kara rushed to relay the message, Arthur turned to Zira and Dr. Alara. "We need to move Arian to a secure location within the main research center. It's our best chance of keeping him safe." Dr. Alara nodded, her scientific demeanor giving way to urgency. "I know just the place. Follow me." The group moved swiftly through the facility's corridors, the sounds of their hurried footsteps echoing off the sterile walls. As they approached the research center's main entrance, a deafening explosion rocked the building. Arthur's combat instincts kicked in. "They're here. Zira, go with Dr. Alara. I'll hold them off." Before Zira could protest, Arthur rushed towards the source of the commotion. Outside, chaos reigned. Major Zorn's forces had launched a full-scale attack on the research center. The streets were filled with the sounds of energy weapons and shouting as Gamelon purists clashed with the facility's defenders. Arthur found himself in the thick of the battle, leading a group of human and Gamelon allies. He used his unique touch to incapacitate female purists, sending waves of uncontrollable arousal through their bodies and rendering them unable to fight. For the males, he relied on his hand-to-hand combat skills, his movements a blur of precision and power. Inside the facility, Zira and Dr. Alara raced through the winding corridors with Arian. The child, sensing the danger, remained uncharacteristically quiet. As they rounded a corner, they found themselves face-to-face with a group of purist infiltrators. Zira's eyes darted around the room, landing on a nearby lab table. In a split-second decision, she handed Arian to Dr. Alara and lunged for a vial of experimental fertility treatment. "Zira, no!" Dr. Alara cried out, but it was too late. Zira plunged the needle into her arm, injecting the concentrated formula. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a surge of energy coursed through her body. Her Gamelon abilities, long dormant, roared to life with unprecedented intensity. With a primal cry, Zira charged at the attackers. Her movements were a blur of blue skin and raw power. She effortlessly tossed one purist across the room, while another crumpled under the force of her enhanced strength. As Zira fended off the attackers, Dr. Alara clutched Arian tightly and edged towards a secure lab. Just as they reached the door, Dr. Marcus Green's voice crackled over the intercom. "Arthur, Zira, anyone who can hear me, I've made a breakthrough." His voice was filled with a mix of excitement and urgency. Arian's body is naturally producing a stable version of the fertility treatment. We don't need invasive procedures. His mere presence could cure the infertility crisis. Arthur, who had fought his way to the central communications hub, felt a surge of hope at this news. He turned to Lieutenant Kara, who was coordinating the defense efforts. "We need to broadcast this to everyone on Gamelon," Arthur said, his voice firm with drive. "It might be our only chance to end this conflict." Kara nodded, her fingers flying over the control panel. "Ready when you are, Commander." Arthur took a deep breath and began to speak, his voice carrying across Gamelon's communication networks. "People of Gamelon, hear me. The cure for our infertility crisis isn't a threat to our way of life. It's a child born of both our worlds, whose very existence offers hope for our future." As Arthur's words spread across the planet, the effect was immediate. Many of the purist attackers lowered their weapons, confusion and hope warring on their faces. The tide of the battle began to turn. But Major Zorn was not so easily swayed. Fueled by hatred and fear, he fought his way through the chaos, determined to reach Arian. His path led him to the research center's roof, where he found himself face-to-face with Arthur. "You've corrupted our people for the last time, human," Zorn snarled, raising his weapon. Arthur stood his ground, his eyes never leaving Zorn's. "It's over, Major. Your people want peace. Why can't you see that?" With a roar of rage, Zorn charged at Arthur. The two men grappled, their fight a desperate struggle at the edge of the roof. As they fought, Arthur's hand brushed against Zorn's exposed skin. The effect was instantaneous and unexpected. Zorn's eyes widened in shock as the arousal effect, typically reserved for Gamelon females, coursed through his body. He staggered back, overwhelmed by the sudden onslaught of sensations. Taking advantage of Zorn's disorientation, Arthur quickly subdued him. As he secured the Major's hands behind his back, Arthur couldn't help but wonder at this new development. It seemed the human-Gamelon interaction held even more mysteries than they had imagined. With Zorn's capture, the remaining purest forces quickly surrendered. A tense calm settled over the city as the sounds of battle faded away. Arthur made his way back into the research center, his heart pounding with anticipation and relief. He found Zira and Arian in the secure lab, both unharmed. As they embraced, Arthur marveled at the strength his partner had shown. "You were incredible," he murmured, noting the faint glow that still emanated from Zira's skin, a lingering effect of the experimental treatment. Dr. Ilera and Dr. Green joined them, their faces alight with excitement despite the recent chaos. "We need to address the public," Dr. Green said. "Explain what we've discovered about Arian's abilities." Arthur nodded, realizing that this moment would shape the future of human-Gamelon relations. He looked down at Arian, who gazed back with eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of both species. "Let's go," Arthur said, taking Zira's hand. "It's time to show them the future." As they stepped out onto the main plaza of the research center, they were met with a sea of faces, human and Gamelon alike. The crowd fell silent, all eyes fixed on the small family that represented a new hope for both species. Arthur took a deep breath, ready to address the gathered crowd and usher in a new era of interspecies cooperation. The future of Gamelon, and perhaps the galaxy, hung on his next words.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.